Liftoff.
What's up, Doom Nation, and welcome back. You are listening to the Two Doom Men podcast. As always, it's Skaggs and yours truly, the captain. And we got a good friend back in the studio with us today. Skaggs, why don't you introduce him?
Yes, sir. Back for the second time on the Two Doom Men podcast. We have attorney Ken Good from the Professional Bondsmen of Texas, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm on their board, or I'm a member of their board of directors.
Very good.
Awesome. We had a good conversation with you. It was almost, I think, probably about a year ago on bail reform, which has been, like a really hot button issue, in the last couple of years. One of like the major policies domestically, I guess you could say, pushed through in various areas of the country. So you reached back out to us, come back on, kind of give us an update. You had a little bit of some details there in the email that were interesting. So I think you'll be able to kind of give us a pretty good update on that. And then I think a little bit later, we'll talk about the New Mexico governor. She has signed a public health emergency, essentially outlawing firearms carry in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I thought, what better person to kind of pick your brain on than Ken in that regard. So we'll talk about that after. Ken, thanks again for joining us. How you doing, man?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing
Of
great.
course.
It's good to see y'all. I like y'all's name, Two Doom Men.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Ken, it's been a year. And I mean, I don't know. I don't see things getting very much better in terms of bail reform and violent crime. I know you have your finger on the pulse way more probably in that regard than we do. This is your job. I wanted to start first actually by asking you, what motivates you to actually go on podcasts and do things like that to talk about this? Because I'm sure there's a million people doing a job like you do, right? But you are actually interested in speaking out on this issue, and you reach out to us about it, which is interesting.
Well, I would say what interests me on talking about this issue is I don't think anyone else is doing it from our perspective. And, there are people that if I go and talk to them, they're going to stand up afterwards and they're just going to say, don't listen to anything Ken says. He's a racist. He's, sexist, or, so it's just the identity politics response. And so you can't even have an intelligent argument. I don't mind having an argument with anybody from any ideology as long as we're having a respectful conversation, because a lot of times I think those are shortcuts. They can't respond. And so instead of responding, they just take, oh, you don't have to listen to them because of some identity issue. And so I just think that when this all started 4 or 5 years ago, we became very clear that nobody knew these issues like we do. And so we had to become experts on them. We had to be willing to be a resource to people that wanted to hear, I'm not going to say the truth, but what's really going on. Because the honest God truth is that what's good for the bail industry is good for the criminal justice system. And what's good for the criminal justice system is usually what's good for the bail industry, the private industry. And so if you're doing damage to the criminal justice system, that's doing damage to the bail industry, you're really just shooting your own foot. And we're starting to have people come out and say that. Just 2 years ago, people were saying, crime's not really an issue. Crime's not really going up. This is a made up issue by the Republicans. That was the mantra 2 weeks before the last election. And now you've got the Oakland chapter of the NAACP coming out in the last month, blasting their local elected officials, saying we need a state of emergency on crime. The DA came out with the same talking points, saying, "Oh, it's so sad to see this great institution just use Republican talking points." And
now the NAACP they're literally saying the NAACP is racist. They're saying,
I know. But what was really great is the regional NAACP came out supporting the local chapter, saying, no, we got a crime problem and we need a state of emergency. So it looks like to me the dam is breaking. And so you had this dichotomy, this difference where one side wouldn't even admit there was a problem. It's kind of hard to say there's no problem now when you've got an NAACP local chapter and a regional chapter siding with them, saying we need a state of emergency on crime because it's gotten that bad.
And this is all because of just bad politics and bad policy that nobody wanted to admit to it.
Yes. And here's the thing. Let's say it in real simple terms. 50% of all murders in the United States, the victims are young Black males. And in our inner cities, it's a lot higher than 50%. because there's a disproportionate number of young black males living in our inner cities. And who's the people killing those people? Normally, people from the same racial group. How have we turned this debate upside down, and we've decided that we need to elevate the people committing the crimes over the victims of those crimes for these most violent offenses when they're the same racial group? It makes no sense. It tells you we've turned this all upside down.
And if you like listen to the let's just say like the federal government's main talking point, what is it they say right now? Like, white nationalists, domestic terrorism is the number one threat to this country.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's fantasy land. I mean, you could probably count the amount of white nationalists, aggressive and violent people on one hand. And I hate the fact that they're even leaning into that identitarian politics thing. But I think all three of us here would agree, like, just violent crime is bad, no matter who's doing it or where it's being done.
Well,
and if it is out of control in one place,
crime
we should
is bad.
do something to stop that. Yeah.
I mean, hasn't the lesson from the last 2 years been just simple property crime is bad if it destroys the ability of your local citizens to feel safe, so that businesses are closing up because you have a fire, you're not going to build back, or you can't withstand, or you can't keep an inventory because of you're getting $25,000 a day shoplifted every day, or you've got like the Nancy Pelosi federal building in San Francisco where they're telling people to stay home, don't come to work because it's not safe to walk from your car to the office. And I mean,
but
that's not sustainable.
Let me ask you this, though. So you have these people telling employees, stay home. It's not safe. But in the same breath, they're like, bail reform's working. So there has to be like an extreme nefarious element here.
Well, you know what? I'm going to say yes to that, but in a different way than I think you would think. Because I think, yes, there's a nefarious element to that, but it's because these people have boxed themselves in a corner. Because 6 months before every national election for the last 6 or 7 years, right before, we have something happen, we'd have this scandal, they would start having protests, they would say, oh, you minority group are being mistreated, you need to come out in larger numbers, and you need to vote, and you need to vote with your anger. And it worked. But the problem is, as soon as the election was over, back to the status quo. Well,
get played every time.
Voters saw it, and they started electing the true believers. And so the rest of the people running for office saw it, and so they jumped on the bandwagon. Now I think they see that they put themselves in a box, but they can't get out of it. Look at Chicago, look at Illinois. I think they were counting on the Illinois Supreme Court to get them out of the box. Because, I mean, I was hearing for 6 months, this Illinois Supreme Court is going to declare this statute that they passed unconstitutional. So that's going to protect the industry, protect the criminal justice system. Well, what did they end up doing? They end up saying, no, it's constitutional. What I heard the court saying is, politicians, you're in a box. You solve it. Don't bring it to the courts to fix. You fix it yourself.
Just because they would just pass the buck to the court system.
Well, and if you're in this box, if you stand up, you're going to have 3 people announce the next day they're running against you, whether you're just a local politician, a state politician, or the Supreme Court of Illinois. That's how bad it is right now.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think there's also probably an aspect to it, Chris. If we've long documented on this show, government will create problems and then build themselves as the solution to it. I don't know if they really are interested in solving these problems, right? I mean, Nancy Pelosi, you referenced her before, right? Like, she's running for re-election again.
I know, isn't that shocking?
It's not shocking.
Beholden to the corruption, she can't leave. Just retire at this point.
In a sense, she's a local representative of San Francisco, and the place has gone to hell in a handbasket. The audacity! You got to really think to run for election again.
Aligned with her, even a family kind of relation.
Yeah, they're related, definitely. So,
I think she's staying in the game to try to give him the inside track whenever the inside track opens itself. I do think that there is maybe not a corrupt element, but there is an element that is pushing for chaos, because within chaos, you can take advantage. Within chaos, you get de facto decriminalization. And so I do think there's a portion of this coalition that is pushing for chaos.
Yeah, I like to, Ken, we mentioned on the last episode, anarcho tyranny. Like, an anarchist state underneath tyranny, where there's these people in charge and they basically destabilize society to the point where the criminals are doing anything they want with impunity, and local law-abiding citizens are they're the ones who are put in jail for trying to defend themselves or do the right thing.
Victim and the criminal all in the same time.
Let's state it a little bit differently. I mean, we've kind of become Venezuela in some ways. If Biden gets reelected, we've become Venezuela. And what that means is we don't police our politicians anymore. Mm-hmm. The party in charge doesn't police its candidates or its representatives. You can do anything you want, and they're going to support you. And part of that's the result of us getting rid of the filibuster. So we got rid of compromise. And so everything is now the extremes. And so that's part of the problem. But, if Biden can get reelected in this environment, then we're Venezuela.
Yeah, it will be interesting. That's the question. That's $1 million question.
Though,
go ahead, Chris.
Because then if we become Venezuela, it's only a matter of time before the CIA leads a coup and throws Biden.
Destabilize and overthrow the government here. Sure.
I don't know.
We might get what we want.
I mean, if you look at our history and say, because I always like what's going to happen in the future is probably what's happened in the past. And so if you look at our history, you would say that parts of our country would become so divisive that we would have states that would say, I can't be a part of this anymore. Yeah. That's what we would probably have happen again.
National divorce.
Yeah, national divorce. And I could see a picture where they're like, yeah, we don't want you anyway. So then, the problem is the states that they don't like are the ones probably bringing in the most revenue at that point. So they would have to fight it for that reason. But I don't know. I hope we're not there. I hope that this is an election, because the numbers for Biden right now say he can't win no matter who he runs against. And that's good for our democracy. That's not a Republican thing. That's not a Democrat thing. It should be that when you do this bad of a job, you can't get reelected, period. That has to be the result of a healthy democracy.
Yeah, that's the principle it's sold on, right? I mean, I tend to disagree with the way democracy works. I don't think it's a great system, but I agree with you. If we're going to use it, yes, it should be the vehicle we use to hold people accountable. And I don't see how Biden has earned another term as president with how bad things have been.
Twitter will tell you different.
Oh, of course, of course.
Well, but I think that we used to police ourselves, our own parties. Look at Nixon. Nixon wasn't impeached. He was asked and told to resign by his own party. And, I think the Democrats went to Clinton and said, you need to resign. And he stood up and said, for the first time, you either support me or I'll burn the whole house down. And they were given a choice and they stood with him. And so I think you see a real change when you get to Clinton.
Yeah, right. I think you could also tie the change to just the larger the government has become also. I think the people in power, they wield this huge monolith behind them that they could kind of try to use to support them.
I'm very hopeful we're just repeating a cycle of the 60s where we felt safe, so we became more forgiving in our criminal laws. We released more people from prison. We started having more crime. And then you start seeing crime go up, which you see now. We have a debate about whether it's really going up. And so then we start having a backlash, and we start having a fight over the backlash. And in a lot of ways, you can say this is just a repeat of the 60s.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So what's the debate, though? I mean, is it because, they're not arresting as many people, so they're saying arrest is down, so crime can't be up? Because this brings me back to this nefarious, intention behind it all. Because I mean, coming from your mouth to our ears and from what Skaggs and I see on a daily basis, crime is not down by any means. And I don't even see how there could be a discussion about it.
Well, the best statistic for crime is car thefts.
Okay.
Carjackings, because insurance companies still require a police report before they're going to pay off on a claim for a stolen car. And so those statistics are pretty eye-opening. I mean, they're really, really bad. But what you're saying is true on a lot of property claim. I mean, you don't report it.
Right.
And I mean, look, if you could go to Houston and just look at the unresolved cases for murder, I mean, probably half of the cases are unresolved, are, they don't have
It's
a
terrible.
suspect. It's crazy. And so the closure rates are dropping, and then the cases filed are dropping. And they're still, I mean, how, with all that crime being down, how are the jails still full?
Right.
Court dockets are still full. I mean, imagine if, in Harris County, they had the 20,000 cases they're down filed. I mean, the only reason why Harris County has not had their criminal justice system collapse is because they're dismissing 90 something percent of the cases. So they're just sitting there churning some paperwork, and then months later they dismiss the case. I mean, that's not criminal justice. That's collapse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it's no accountability, even at the the person to person level. I remember back in college, I took a sociology class and I had a great professor. He was a former New York City police officer, and he talked about this, and he was saying how like carjackings and car theft are the great indicator of crime, because most other crime, as crime becomes normalized in society, people stop even saying anything. Like, you get something robbed from you or whatever, or shooting happens, people don't even call police. They don't report it. It becomes normalized. And then politicians will turn around and point to them and be like, see, crime's going down. But
Yes.
you, living in the real world, in the Bronx or wherever you might be, you could just feel, no, crime is not going down. Things are worse than they've ever been before. But on paper, statistically, it might look like they're going down.
All fudging numbers. Just one lie after
Look in the
another.
books.
Well, look at California. They reclassified felonies or a group of felonies down to misdemeanors. Then they quit prosecuting those misdemeanors, and they said crime is down. Look what a great job we've done. When you hear somebody come forward and say, when we release more people from prison, we will be safer, it's the mumbo jumbo. I mean, these groups were releasing studies 4 years ago saying, if we quit prosecuting misdemeanor crime will go down. Well, I think the last 2 years have proved that's absolutely false, and crime is just soaring, especially misdemeanor crime, because the criminal element, organized crime, has figured out a way to make an absolute fortune off of it. But we're still being told, in parts of our country, that if we quit prosecuting misdemeanor crime will go down. If it doesn't make common sense, it's not common sense.
So this might be a stupid question that has an easy answer to it, but like, how are like judges and lawyers and law enforcement, are they just following marching orders at this point? Or, because a lot of these, I would like to believe that there's more good judges than corrupt judges and stuff like that. And there's, only 1% are bad cops and 99% are good cops. Is it just following orders at this point? Like, what can they do to change this? Because I'm sure they all swore an oath. Every judge was sworn in to uphold the law, and now they're dismissing 98% of those cases. And it's not just all, armed robbery or carjacking. I'm sure there's some heinous crimes letting these serious criminals just walk scot-free.
I'm finding that judges fall into two categories. Number one, the ones that want to do the right thing. So in those areas, in our urban cities, they're tying their hands. Like in New York, they did bail reform, which they've now rolled it back 4 times. But the original bill said, if you're arrested for this charge, you are to be released on no bond, without bond. And so the judges had no choice. No matter how many times you were arrested, no matter if you were a gang member, no matter if you were organized crime, you're a career criminal, they had no choice. The statute did not allow them to do anything different. Same thing in California. But so we have that group where we're just tying the hands of the judges in the name of protecting the poor, but we're doing it in such a way that you can't do anything about gang members, organized crime, or career criminals. Then you've got the second group, which we're starting to see go into office, like in Harris County, where you've got activist judges who are going in and they just want to take down the system. When we had a judge elected there, and that was, his promise, I'm going to take down the system from within. And, he didn't get reelected. And there was a petition to remove him from office pending at the time he got defeated. So you've got both extremes, people just trying to do the right thing where we're tying their hands, and then the newly elected activist judges that just want to tear down the system.
It's unfortunate.
I think you touched on something that's really important there. People, there was actually like a recall vote there. people need to do something about all this, right? Like, I don't want people, I am optimistic like you are, but people cannot just be sitting on their hands as society goes to hell a handbasket. You got to use your rights, right? Freedom of speech and all these things, and fight back against this stuff, not just sit on your hands and do nothing.
Well, but the question is, who do you believe? When you're just Joe Q Public, you're married, you've got 2 kids, you and your wife are both working, you're just trying to survive in this economy. You're living paycheck to paycheck, and you're raising kids. You are consumed. I mean, look, I've raised 2 daughters, and I've gone to many a dance recital where I'm standing in the back with my phone on a phone call or a meeting, smiling, waving at my daughter, just trying to do, survive. And I think it's hard for those people. Who do you listen to? Used to, everybody wants to issue a voter poll or a voter recommendation. And, everybody's saying, well, you can't listen to them because of their identity. You can't listen to them because that's the corrupt law enforcement. So I think we're coming to the end of this who do you trust period of time. And I think it's going to settle back to who's the one protecting us. Who's the one performing public safety? And if the law enforcement says this isn't right, you're going to see a settling to law enforcement says it doesn't work, so we're not going to do that anymore.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. I think we're getting close to the point where the line is drawn in the sand, like, well, this is who I'm going to follow. And I think terms like being called a racist, a sexist, xenophobe, or whatever are just thrown around so much now that, like, that line's drawn. I don't care. Call me a racist. I will be a racist if it means crime starts to drop in my city and it's safe for me to park my car and not get robbed at every red light.
Well, I try to always be respectful, no matter where.
Of course.
And so if someone likes to say that to me, I'm like, well, you know what? Let's set that argument aside and we'll come back to it. But do you have a response on the merits? I mean, you would think rising crime is a problem for everybody, no matter what color you are. We all are against crime. And you know what? Before this crime wave, the actions we had taken had decreased crime, had decreased the murder rate. So we had actually increased the life expectancy of young Black males by 2 years, which is the equivalency of solving obesity in this country. And we've thrown all that away, and we're doing it in such a weird, we're living in the twilight zone where the DA of LA says, well, we just have a disagreement over who the real victim is. We think the victim is the criminal, not the murdered person.
I think that's such a great point you're making. We were decreasing a lot of these negatives in society. And normally, I heard this quote recently. I thought it was fantastic. Government will come along and let's use workplace injuries, for example. They'll pass OSHA, right? And OSHA will come out and they'll be like, you see, since we passed OSHA, workplace injuries have gone down. But they don't, they start counting history from day one of OSHA being created, right? And they don't look at before that. If you look back before that, the workplace injuries were already going down. Right. Then they passed OSHA. So I heard someone use the thing. It's like government likes to see a parade happening, jump in front of the parade and then take credit for the parade happening. So it's interesting because that's usually what they do. But in this regard, crime, violence, etc., things were going down. But they've now enacted policies and they've gotten in front of the parade, except the parade is going in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Well, I actually think the mayors are the ones that are going to stop this, because what we're finding out from the last few years is, if we don't change course, look at San Francisco, their average occupancy rate on their commercial buildings is 38%. I mean, commercial buildings will start defaulting on that occupancy rate. And if they're defaulting, declaring bankruptcy, then suddenly the cities and the counties are going to lose a lot of income, and it could even push them. I mean, if they're losing 12, 15, 20% of their annual tax base because of defaults, it's not long before they start defaulting as well. And so I think the mayors are the ones that are going to pull a stop to this. And we're just seeing so much data. I mean, during COVID, I refer to that as a period of bail reform on steroids. We got to see all the crazy things that they were suggesting, and we got to see the results of them. And the DA of Yolo County released a study comparing people just simple release that were just released without bond or no bond, whatever you want to call it. In Texas, we call it released on PR bond, and compare that to people released on a surety bond. And he found that if you were released on no bond or a simple release, you had a 200% greater risk in the next 18 months of committing a violent offense versus somebody released on a private industry bond. And you're like, how does that make a difference? This private industry has accountability. They have oversight. If you start screwing up, they're telling the judge. We're also involving your family. All that accountability that you don't have. And if you fail to show up for court, there's incentives for the private industry to go get you and bring you back as quick as possible to get your case back on track. No other release mechanism has that. And, released on zero bond, if you don't show up for court, you get a warrant issued. The warrant goes down in LA County and joins the tens of thousands of other warrants waiting to be served, which means you've got to commit another crime before you come back into the system.
That's amazing.
He's speaking my language here, Chris.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're hearing it, right? Ken is talking about how the private industry is doing a much more efficient job than the public industry, right? As someone who
there's no accountability for the public. Yeah.
Someone who considers himself a libertarian anarchist, people will be like, well, an anarchist without the government, who's going to fix all of our problems? I don't know. Ken just laid out a beautiful example of how the private industry will do a much better job at solving that issue.
Well, the private industry's been around for 200 years. There's a reason. It does one thing. It does it very well. And, there was a mayor, a minority mayor from that was on News Nation talking about criminal justice reform. And you know what she said? She said, until there is an alternative to the private industry that has the same accountability and the same failure to appear rate, then you don't have an alternative.
Yeah. I guess you could say the alternative or the accountability mechanism is supposed to be democracy. But again, as we've seen, it doesn't really work out perfectly.
Well, democracy only matters if, Zelensky in Ukraine decides democracy is a thing, right?
I think their argument is based on, people are really good. They're basically good people, and they want to get their cases resolved. So we don't need bail. We don't need all these things. They're going to want to come anyway. Isn't that contrary to everything we've ever been taught? People are basically bad. Isn't that what the Bible says? The Bible says, we're basically bad people, we're saved by grace. And there's lots of philosophies out there that say, I fight you. If I come and meet you, I fight for your power. And civilization is a compromise where we're compromising our power for public safety. We're kind of giving that all up right now in some of our urban cities. And so that's going to bring back chaos. That's going to bring back posses. That's going to bring back justice, vigilante justice. And
I've been saying that for a long time.
Batman.
Yeah.
I agree with you, though.
It's very interesting what you're saying about the guns, because, in what we're going to talk about next, it's like, if you won't protect me, why won't you at least give me the ability to protect myself? Right. Come on. Doesn't that
because at the end of the day, this is just, to me, it's nefarious. It's completely nefarious that they want the crime to run. Then they want you to get rid of your guns. It's, we haven't really discussed it on this episode. And I don't want to go too far off track, but, Skaggs in our private group chats brought up this Operation Poke the Bear or whatever you want it was called. And it's really just let the criminals run wild. Let's infringe on your rights until somebody or some group from the right goes static, gets violent, gets just pushed to the edge and fights back in a vigilante matter, maybe. And then the media and the left and the establishment has all the ammo they need. We could declare martial law. We could say this is a health emergency.
Patriot Act 2.0, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I feel like a lot of this is just so nefarious. Because you can't look at a judge or the chief of police and be like, do you really think this is working? And have this guy or woman with a straight face be like, this is bail reform has been the best thing to ever happen.
Well, I look at Harris County. Harris County, the politicians were pushing for a settlement. And one of the arguments they made was, look, we've got to settle this case. We spent $8 million in legal fees, and that's just too much money. And so they settled. They elected the new judges, and the new judges all promised to settle and give the plaintiffs everything they wanted. While implementing the new settlement, they've spent over $100 million. And look at all those opportunities for money to be misplaced, to say it nicely.
Yeah.
But you've got, $100 million versus $8 million. And then what did the Fifth Circuit just rule in the last 6 months? That case should have never been filed in federal court, and they reversed it.
Well, there's some measure of accountability there to some extent. Yeah.
They're still following it, even though it's been reversed.
That's interesting. You're seeing that become normalized as well.
Yeah, we're weaponizing courts. And that's why there's a case pending at the U.S. Supreme Court. It's called Davis versus Dallas County. And it's there on a petition for cert, a writ of cert. And I think there might be a chance that the court could take that case, because that gives them the opportunity to get rid of this litigation nationwide. And so I don't know. I'm kind of 50-50 on whether I think they'll take it. But if they do, it'll be to get rid of this litigation, not to expand it, not under the current Supreme Court.
Nice.
Interesting. I think that'll tie in good to our next topic here, which we'll talk about New Mexico and the governor there, what she did. So I'll preface it with the article here so everybody can understand. If you haven't seen it, it has really blown up on, at least in social media. People are very angry.
This is pretty big. Yeah.
And rightfully so. And I think it's actually a good thing how many people are angry. But from ABC News, New Mexico's governor's temporary ban on carrying guns in public meets resistance. Emergency orders issued by New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, suspending the right to carry firearms in public in and around Albuquerque, are getting pushback from gun rights groups and some law enforcement officials and elected leaders, citing the recent shooting deaths of 3 children, including an 11-year-old boy gunned down outside a minor league baseball park last week. Grisham issued a 30-day ban on open and concealed carrying of firearms in her state's largest city and surrounding areas in Bernalillo County. The decree came a day after Lujan, I don't know how to say her name, Grisham declared gun violence a statewide public health emergency, saying the rate of gun deaths in New Mexico increased 43% from 2009 to 2018. When New Mexicans are afraid to be in crowds, to take their kids to school, to leave a baseball game, when their very right to exist is threatened by the prospect of violence at every turn, something is very wrong, John Grisham, a Democrat, said in a statement. So, it's going to go without saying here, this is not popular with me and Chris as two big gun guys and defenders of the Second Amendment, and I think that your right to own a gun in self-defense goes beyond the Second Amendment. It is a natural right of every human being to be able to defend themselves or whatever the fuck they choose to defend themselves. So I think this is just insane. I'm concerned. I know how America works, Ken, and maybe you could back me up here. Like, we seem to work more based, like the law seems to work based off of precedent more than it does off of the sanctity of the Constitution. So I see this as a very dangerous precedent setter, possibly. Like 2 weeks to stop the spread in gun violence. We could just declare a public emergency unilaterally by executive decree. And now you can't have a gun anymore because the governor felt like it.
Well, but think about this. Take a step back and look at this. This is not the first time an elected Democrat has blamed the increase in crime on guns. This is really, if you look at this, take a step back, this looks like desperation, because crime has gotten bad enough. Everybody's noticing. She's even having to admit that it's taking place. And so she's falling back on a staid, standard Democrat talking point that it's not my fault. It's not our fault for not being able to provide public safety. It's those damn guns. And if we can, and what's the 30-day ban going to do? What she's doing is holding her breath, hoping that nothing happens for 30 days. And then she could say, look, see, this was great for 30 days. So now we got to make it for the rest of your life, for the rest of all time. And it is really a sign of desperation. It's a sign that, once again, they can't deny that crime is increasing. And so they're trying to fit it into their narrative that fits within their identity politics. And right now, that's kind of being guns are the problem, not people.
Yeah, I also like to point out that she took a survey from 2006 to 2018 or something like that, right? You read that, it was like in the second paragraph.
Yeah, it says the rate of gun deaths in New Mexico increased 43% from 2009 to 2018.
I would bet any amount of money that from 2019 to 2023, it decreased. Why would you stop your survey at 2018 or 2019?
Yeah, so that's suspicious. I would also say that statistics can also misrepresent reality sometimes.
Well,
I mean, it could be that there was like one gun death in 2009 and now there's like four. So
well,
like, yeah,
anytime they're citing gun deaths, you got to figure out how many of them are suicides too.
that too,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, but then they could be spinning it as like a violent crime, someone aggressing on another person. Obviously, we all agree that like a suicide by gun is horrific, and we want to stop people from doing that, right? But it's not the same as saying that people are using
Gang
guns
member,
to commit crime against other people. They're committing crime against themselves.
Well, and think about it. If gangs are killing 3 little kids, I mean, and you enact this ban for 30 days, I mean, well, okay, how's that going to affect the gang? It's not going to affect them one iota. And so really what you're doing is you're preventing the Good Samaritan from stepping in. And, I know there wasn't for these 3 deaths, tragically, but for a lot of, I mean, we don't hear in the news enough about the Good Samaritans that stepped in and saved the day because it's against the narrative. So we don't hear that.
Yeah.
But I keep going back to, come on, our politicians, if you are not going to be able to protect me, if you're not willing to spend the money, or if you're going to scare off the police officers and run them out of town so that they cannot do their job and no one's there when I need them in my hour of need, why can't I just protect myself? Come on.
Because you'll be able to protect yourself against them when they're going door to door,
Yeah, this goes back to what we've been saying the last couple of episodes, anarcho tyranny, right? Like you criminalize the law-abiding people and you allow the criminals to just run rampant and do whatever they want. Someone in the press conference, one of the media, I mean, the media actually did a pretty good job for once of pushing her on this when she gave this speech, and they were like, literally, I think someone said like it already is illegal to shoot people and kill them, like. You're just going to criminalize, law-abiding citizens.
And New Mexico is an open carry state.
Yeah, and someone referenced
think about this. They failed families. They have because families don't stick together anymore. They failed our inner cities. They, schools are failing. The dropout rates are terrible. They don't have job opportunities anymore in the big cities. Drugs are just terrible in the big cities. And then you're like, oh, we're going to solve this problem. We can't provide you public safety, but we're going to solve this by banning you from having a gun when somebody breaks into your house. I mean, that's crazy.
I think someone asked her, like, what about the 80-year-old grandpa, right, who goes to downtown Albuquerque to the pharmacy and carries a gun with him because it's a little bit dangerous crime-wise. If the police catch him with the gun, should they arrest him? And she said yes, that they should.
Yeah.
Maybe
ruin their lives.
Maybe he shouldn't have a gun. I mean, come on, like just again, back in reality, we're talking about an 80-year-old grandpa. He's not gonna be able to probably not gonna be able to fist fight someone if they attack him, and he has to defend himself. A gun is an equalizer for an older person who won't be able to defend themselves, perhaps against a gang of criminals who might.
Well, the question I want is, Governor, isn't it your fault that we have so much crime right now? I mean, it was on your watch that crime increased, and so now you're trying to blame that on the law-abiding citizens that are carrying guns because you were a failure at your job. And why is that going to make things better? I mean, it just seems like it's a recipe to make things even worse.
Is there bail reform and all this in New Mexico?
Words out of my mouth.
Yeah, I think that absolutely. Because think about it, when you take away accountability, you're taking away, I mean, that creates chaos. That puts pressure on you because, think about it, you got a conveyor belt going through the criminal justice system. And in our big cities, that means on average, the same number of cases are being added to the conveyor belt every day, every year. If you don't resolve that same number of cases, then you're going to have a bigger backlog to start the next year. And during COVID, what did we do? We didn't do any cases. So our backlog started out at the end of COVID really high. And then crime just went apeshit crazy. And so we've got this push, this chaos that's already there, and we still are adding new cases. And so that's putting incredible pressure, which we've already talked about, to dismiss cases to prevent the complete collapse of the system. They're discounting crime. They're giving people an incentive to plead guilty, which means we'll give you less of a penalty. We'll give you half of what you would normally get. Half of what a jury would give you, because we don't have time to take you to trial because we've got too much of a backlog. And it's just causing chaos. And it's happening everywhere where you're not getting control of it. And when you have these left, our friends on the left who are looking
You're much nicer to them than we are. But
who are in a box. They got themselves in a box. And they don't know how to get out of it. And until they figure out how to get out of it, or we vote them out of the office and replace them with people that are going to do the right thing, it's just going to continue to get worse.
Yeah. I just want to zoom out to the macro real quick and use this entire situation as an example for the listener of what me and Chris are crying about all the time, which is government tyranny, and understand how this can be used as government tyranny and how it's an example of, we were just saying how bail reform could be adding to the violent crime problem in New Mexico, right? And it's like of themselves, like they're shooting themselves in the foot with this policy that creates more crime. Then the governor goes and passes, by decree, a law that restricts
a
public health emergency that restricts your rights as an individual to have a gun. Guns control the monopoly on violence in the country. There's a reason why the founding fathers put it as a second thing in the Bill of Rights, right? Because they understood the monopoly on violence and how the balance of power works between government and we the people. Again, like we were saying before, if this ends up working out in her favor to her agenda, yeah, I'm sure there'll be people who will point to this as a success story, and they'll then use that to justify perhaps a federal ban or public health emergency on gun violence. I know Joe Biden has talked about this before, the assault weapons ban and all these things that they talk about, right? So he'll then point to this as an example of why it works and why we should do it, and damn the Constitution. So that when we're here like sounding the alarm, it's not for any reason. They're constantly trying.
Isn't this just like Biden right before the election doing an executive order forgiving student loan debt? It is something that he can't do, something he admitted he couldn't do before. But you know what? The numbers were looking really bad for him. And so he had to reach out to the young people where his demographic was catering and make just a promise to them. I will forgive $10,000 or $20,000 if you vote for me. And when he made that promise, he knew that was not going to stand up. In fact, he was hoping it wouldn't stand up because we could never afford to transfer that kind of debt. So he made an empty promise with the hope and prayer that it wasn't going to stand up, knowing it wouldn't. And you know what? It worked. It worked.
Yeah. Cost him nothing. And then, the corporate press and the media, they're not going to rake him over the coals for that. They're going to carry water for him and just ignore it later on. Only a handful of good leftists are left in the media who would even make this point, like a Jimmy Dore or something like that. But otherwise, he gets away with it scot-free. So I got two more questions for you on this. Go ahead, Chris. Before
I was going to say, I feel the reporters who were grilling the mayor or governor of New Mexico should have been like, well, what are you going to do about the gangs? I think the questioning should have went to, in that direction.
Yeah. One optimistic on this story. I've seen that the sheriff's department and a lot of the police are not for this in the
right,
area.
but it's not up to the sheriff's department.
It's up to state police.
Yeah.
But again, it's going to come down to them to decide whether to enforce this or not. But at least like local police are saying like, no, we don't think this is a good idea, and it's an infringement on rights.
No.
I've seen people are also like protesting in Albuquerque, which is good. Your rights, you only have your rights if you actually like try and use them,
adhere to it. Yeah.
Or I'm saying like you have to actually like exercise your rights. Like that's what we do every week here on the show, our right to freedom of speech. If we just stay quiet and not do anything, then we lose them probably, because that's
I think time will tell us a lot about this little policy, because if it was what I think it is, a sign of desperation, trying to figure out an explanation from the left's perspective why crime is increasing, then we're going to know pretty quickly, because the desperation will force them to change. If it was a cold, calculated decision with a bigger agenda, then, the next shoe will drop. And so this is one of those instances where time is going to be very interesting and it will be very telling.
Okay. So two more questions. What do you think about this? Do you think it's going to like stand up? Do you think it'll get, I think someone's filing a lawsuit. Like it'll probably go to the Supreme Court.
I think there's an investigation into her and her staff as well already.
You can, as someone from this area, do you think it'll be ruled unconstitutional at some point?
With the current Supreme Court, yes. I mean, when we have these things start, I mean, you look at where this case would begin, and that looks, and you have to know whether it's going to go to the Ninth Circuit. because the Ninth Circuit's the most liberal circuit in the country. If it goes to the Ninth Circuit, then it has a greater chance of being withheld before it goes to the Supreme Court. But it could be fast tracked really easily if they deny if they deny a preliminary injunction, because that can go really quick on getting a stay. And so I think with the current Supreme Court, we've had so many rulings on gun rights. This is inconsistent with any of those rulings where you're saying has nothing to do with guns, has nothing to do with our analysis of gun rights. We're just talking about health. And I don't think that stands up. And it sure doesn't stand up, I don't believe, with the current Supreme Court. So, yes, I think it will be declared improper and probably even stayed. The question is, she's only doing it for 30 days. So if she can get by 30 days, she'll declare victory no matter what.
Okay. My second question then is going to be, do you think that when a politician passes one of these laws or like executive decrees, by executive fiat, and it is deemed unconstitutional later, there's this lag time in between. So in between, a politician can pass this tyrannical law, and then it might go 2 or 3 years before it's overturned. Do you think that there should be some sort of criminal penalty against the politician or person in office who
tar and feathering
and unconstitutional law? Like, you're infringing on people's rights, and then for a period of time, and because there's a lag time, you just kind of get away with it to some extent.
No, I don't think we should have a criminal penalty for that, because that will chase away the good people from running from office. I mean, because we're weaponizing criminal laws right now against the party out of control. Right now, we see it all over the country. We see it in DC. We see it in New York. We see it in Florida. And so I'm not in favor of that. But what we need to do is we need to go back to this time period where parties held their own politicians accountable to a certain level. Can you even imagine the Democrats throwing somebody out of the House of Representatives right now? I can't even see that. I can't imagine. In the past, we've voted on a bipartisan nature to exclude somebody from the House. And then I would say, if someone's elected and they do something like that and they lose, the electorate should punish them for that in the next election. You took advantage of us, you misled us, and you were wrong, and there's a penalty for that. We don't have that right now. We don't have it at all. In fact, you're really told to ignore it. I mean, and I blame the press for that. And we don't have a good press because nobody. You're on a team, and we've got to get off that. And we need to get rid of the filibuster, or we need to bring back the filibuster, because that forces compromise. We've gotten rid of it, and so now we're governing from the edges. And as long as we're governing for the edges, we will continue to have problems. We'll continue to have chaos. We'll continue to have periods of time where, when a new party comes into power, the first year is going to be spent undoing as much as possible of what the last
talked about that before
administration did. I mean, have we ever seen that before till the last 2 administrations? I've never seen that.
Yeah, that's going to be a future episode of ours.
Yes.
Whoever's the next president, we're going to have the episode about all the executive orders that president signed undoing the other executive orders. We did that last time when Biden became president. We talked about like 10 or 15 undoings of other executive orders and how it just like
what Trump did it,
playing ping pong back and forth.
And then whoever gets elected next. I mean, I'm thinking it will be a Democrat. If it's not, then we're a banana republic, because even a banana can be elected into office based on Biden's record.
Oh, you mean you said Democrat? You think it's going to be a Republican that gets elected?
I do think yes. I think it'll be a Republican. I don't even know who it'll be. There's a lot of things going every which way, but the articles that I believe in says that Biden has trouble against any of the Republicans. And he should. History would say he should. And I think it's rhetoric to say that he's not. I think it's just it's posturing. He has problems. He currently cannot get reelected, and you're starting to see stories about how worried the Democrats are, and really their only hope is to just completely murder Trump politically and then make him the candidate. That's their only hope, and that's what they're really going for right now.
Yeah, we've been talking for a while now, thinking good old Michelle Obama is going to be replaced.
They're weighing other options too, perhaps.
No, the rumor I like that I've heard is that at the very last minute they pull Biden and it's Newsom.
Heard that story too, and then I'm hearing
last episode.
Michelle Obama with Newsom as VP. be a number of things, but it has to happen before the primary because RFK can't be in the picture.
Oh yeah, well, if they do it that early, everybody comes out of the woodwork to run for president. I mean, even whatever the guy from the guy of the old guy, Bernie Sanders, even he comes out of the woodwork to run for a third time. So I don't. They have to orchestrate it. I think it's difficult. I don't think they can because I think everybody comes out of the woodwork to run then.
Right.
All right.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, we will see. Ken, I really want to thank you again for coming on with us. Do you want to shout out where everybody could find you and how they can support you?
Sure. If you would like to have more information about bail reform in the United States or in Texas, go to our website, pbtx.com. We have a blog where we highlight important stories. We also have a newsletter you can sign up for, but we also have our own podcast called The Bail Post. If you want to go to it, it's called thebailpost.com. It's recently been ranked in the top 10 of the 60 best criminal justice podcasts in the country, and so we're very proud of it. We highlight these issues twice a month and try to educate and be a resource for legislatures and elected officials when they want to find out what works and what doesn't work.
That's awesome. Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
Stick around, everybody. We're going to transition to our Tweets of the Week segment next. We're going to let Ken go here. We're not going to put him through a Tweets of the Week segment with us. So, Ken, thank you again for coming on with us, man.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Anytime you want to come on with us, man.
Yep, just email us again.
Okay, two doom men. See you later.
Thank you, Ken.